Hi everyone and welcome to part one of about a 3-series part that I'm going to do on Flash. One of my subscribers has asked me to do a bit of a video on Flash because he's got a wedding coming up in a few weeks. Now this is quite a basic tutorial, especially the part one. So I will say if you're really good on Flash and you know what you're doing and you don't want to waste 15-20 minutes, don't do it. If you're bored and you just love me, which should be the case, then keep watching. Right, so one of the first things first, I'll just tell you my setup. I've got a camera here on a tripod. The reason why I've got it on a tripod is one, I've hurt my arm. Two, it's easier for me to keep talking to the camera. The sun is coming in and out of the window, so the exposure is going to change on the video, but it is what it is. I am shooting something over there on the table. I have got a flash on. It is turned off at the minute, and I have got a bounce on it. Now, the only reason why I've put the bounce on it, it's like one of those stiff white things that you put on your flash and you can bend it and it stays where you bend. They're on Amazon. If you want one, let me know. I will put a link to one in the description. I do recommend you get it because it's really good for fill flash and flash when you're indoors. If you can bounce off the ceiling and stuff like that, that's great. But bearing in mind, when you bounce off the ceiling, the light then comes straight back down and creates a big shadow under your chin. So at least with this, if you bend it back a bit so that your flash also hits the ceiling, you get a big bounce from the front of this and you get bounce off the ceiling as well. So you do fill light everywhere, but you will eliminate that big shadow. Sorry if I just knocked my mic. So that's why I use that. You maybe not use a tripod during the ceremony, I don't know. I don't even know if you're going to be allowed to use flash during the ceremony. I haven't been allowed for the past few years, I don't even ask anymore. But if you haven't got really good lenses and you need to use some and the priest or the vicar will let you, then yeah, sweet. But I do recommend you keep it on camera. I don't know how skilled you are with flash. I'm using a YN685. I've also got off-camera triggers, which we will go about in another video, but not this one. So one of the first things first, what I would do is, which you've probably already know, is what is the limit of your ISO on your camera? I'd say D7000, 1600, right? 1600, yes, you can go higher, but 1600, rarely. You did say you had an f2.8 lens, a kit lens, or 17-55 kit or something. That's a great lens. I would recommend buying a 50mm f1.8 because that is your low light beast and they're really, really sharp and they work fantastic. And I would also recommend that you can either get the Nikon version, but I think, the people who make this flash, is it Yongho, whatever you want to call them, I think they make a 50mm f1.8 really cheap. Get that before this wedding. And if you get really stuck in a pickle, you can shoot that at f2 and that'll give you another stop light over your 2.8. But I will tell you, it's pretty dark in this room now. I'm pretty bright because I'm near the window, but over in this corner what I'm going to shoot in a minute is pretty dark. So that aside, if you can use flash, great. I'd put a bounce on your flash. You could use off camera, but in ceremony, I wouldn't recommend it. So you can use this, right? So let's say that you're going to go this route. So what we're going to do is, first things first, I would decide, let's say they're just getting married here now, I would decide what my camera settings need to be. Now, I will tell you that I'm going to start off at 1/100 of a second at f4 at ISO 800. I recommend you do that too. Unless you're a bit more pro-like, that's a good starting point. 1/100 of a second is a quick enough shutter speed for very slow moving action. f4 is a good aperture. Even f2.8 if you need it. But we'll start at f4. You can work out whether you want 2.8 instead, and ISO 800. And what we will do first of all is, I'll just zoom back, right back. I've even got my video camera in. I'm going to focus. And I'm going to take a shot. Now I'm looking at that shot and it's a couple of stops underexposed. Now I knew it were going to be like that because I've just had a little mess about. But the thing of it is, you may not. So now that I know that 1/100 of a second f4, in fact, let me see what ISO I'm at, I can't remember. Oh, I'm at 1600. I don't want to be at 16. Let me just turn that down. Oops. Let me just turn that down a bit. Right, we'll try 800. I'll go again. 800's better. 1600 was a bit bright. So we're at 1/100 of a second, ISO 800, f4. And I'm about two stops underexposed. Now, I could go to an f2.8, not on that lens, because it's not a 2.8 lens, but I could go to f2.8 and only be 1 stop underexposed. Now, I recommend if you're going to use flash, and you are allowed to use flash, usually a couple of stops underneath the ambient will give you a nice look. A nice look, it'll give you a nice look. And it'll freeze a bit of the action as well. So you could probably drag your shutter speed to an 80th or a 60th, as long as you are using at least a couple of stops of flash. And that is the idea of not turning the flash on at first and taking an ambient reading. Because if you just did it all in automatic, you won't have a clue what the camera's deciding to do for your flash. It could be giving you a third a stop of flash, you don't know. But now, this way, I can look at my image and I can also look through the viewfinder, and that gives me an indication of how underexposed it is as well. So I'm in manual, so I know those settings can't change. So unless somebody brings in a big ass light, I'm gonna stay a couple of stops. I think it's two and a third stops underexposed. I'm gonna stay like that all the way through the ceremony. So if I then turn my flash on, I know that my flash will try and make, it'll try and make my meter go to the middle, which would be 2 1/3 stops of flash. Yeah? Or you can use manual flash, it's up to you, but I recommend ETTL to start off with while you get to grips with your flash. But I do recommend quickly learning how manual works as well, so that you can use manual. But if you're walking around the church and you're going a bit closer to the bride, a little bit further, you're bobbing, you're ducking, you're weaving, you want automatic flash to keep working for you. At the minute, I've got it, let me just have a look. I actually had my flash turned up 2/3 of a stop, my flash compensation. Basically, you've got two compensations. Well, you have on Canon. You've got flash exposure compensation and exposure compensation. Exposure compensation is going to be useless because you're shooting in manual. So if you want to underexpose the ambient, you just manually do it by halving your ISO, go from an f4 to a 5.6, or go from 1/100 of a second to 200 of a second, and you can make your shot darker. You don't need exposure compensation. Flash, on the other hand, is when the camera in a minute goes, don't worry, John, I'm going to fix this 2 stops underexposed image for you, bam. If the flash isn't bright enough for my liking, I can go into the camera and say, go slightly brighter on that flash, please, because it's not doing quite what I want to do. Now, bearing in mind, if you shoot raw, even if it is a little bit dark, you can fix it later. But why fix it later when it's just a click or two on your camera and you can fix it there and then? So let's just take one more shot. I'm still showing around a couple of stops, 2.5 stops, 2 stops on the histogram. It's also showing on the meter inside, but I'm not bothered about that, but that is a rough indication. So now if we turn on the flash, so don't forget 1/100 second f4 ISO 800, and we go bam, and we take a look at that, you'll see it on the screen, look at the before and after, you can see I've got an absolute ace image. And I know that the ambient is a couple of stops underneath the flash because I turned the flash off. And so I know if the bride moves now, even if I put my shutter speed at a 60th, although if I put my shutter speed at a 60th or a 50th, bearing in mind I'll be letting another full stop of ambient in. So I may have to then half my ISO to kill it again. But I'll let you work out those values, but I will go into them in more detail. This is why it's handy to know your f-stops, your ISO numbers and your shutter speeds, because once you get an exposure with your flash, let's say we had that flash on 1/4 power in manual and it's on a light stand, I can walk around the room taking pictures and adjust my camera settings in my camera and never ever touch the flash. Say, well, I want my flash, I want to go to an f4, I want to go to an f5.6, but if I do, I'm going to be a stop dark on my flash. So I can double my ISO, which will give me that stop back. So it is handy to know your numbers. So with that being said, That's great. We've got a nice flash. I still think it's a bit dark because I like my histogram 3/4 of the way along my histogram. So I'm going to use ETTL still, but I'm going to go 1, 2. I've now just told my flash to go 2/3 of a stop brighter than it thinks it should. So now officially I'm nearly using 3 full stops of flash power to give me a correct exposure. And that's how I do it. Now I only said 1/100 of a second f4 ISO 800 because it's a good starting point in low light and it should take in some ambient. You'll see that it's a couple of stops dark. Now you can play with that ambient exposure and do what you like. And I recommend doing the same thing when you're doing your group shots. Say to yourself, I'd recommend on group shots to go to 200 of a second, f8, ISO 200. Take your shot. You want it ever so slightly dark on the face. Forget anything else in your scene. Get the face so it's ever so slightly dark, only slightly. Turn your flash on, fill with flash, and you won't even know you've used flash. Nobody will see you've used flash, and it'll just give a little pop to your photographs, and the group will pop off and they'll look fantastic. Don't forget, get one of these bounce, definitely get one of these bounce cards here. You can use the little one on the flash. It ain't very good. I don't know if I said, but this is a YN685, so it's a cheap flash. It's not an expensive flash. Get one of them. If out, get 2 of them. And they'll work. I've never had one break on me. They work fine. I don't recommend paying 400 quid for Nikon. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning. If I have, I'll edit one bit out. But get a 50mm 1.8 lens because it'll help you out in a low light pickle. Yeah, I think Yongho or Yongho, however you want to pronounce it, they do one really cheap. And you'll better shoot at f2.8. You might not even need flash. You might find out at ISO 1250 at f2.2 at 1/100 of a second, you don't even need flash. I recommend avoid using it if you can, but if you can't and the scene calls for it, like I've said, if you know that 1600 is your max ISO you want to go, then if you're still dark at ISO 1600 at 1/100 of a second at f2.2, let's say, if you buy a 50mm, then you need some help from your flash, and it's as simple as that. Or if you're banned from using flash, you'll have to put your ISO to 3200. Or half your shutter speed and just take plenty of shots to get them in focus. But bearing in mind when she comes down aisle, 50th of a second, you're going to get all blurred shots. Again, that's unless you've took your ambient reading first and you're 3 stops, 2.5 stops underexposed at 50th of a second at f4 at ISO 800, your flash will freeze the action then. Don't be under this illusion that your flash will freeze the action. It will only freeze the action if you are underexposing your image enough for the flash to freeze the action. Remember that. Shutter speed freezes action, but it only freezes action if it's quick enough. How quick depends on what you're photographing. Anyway, I'll leave this video at that now, and you will see in part 2 and part 3 I may take the flash off camera, because by taking it off camera you want to keep looking at your exposure to see if ETTL has got it correct. I'll just give you a quick example. If I pop this flash off here now and put it here on a light stand, I could take an ambient reading the same, turn the flash on, put it into manual, take the same picture again. If it was too bright, keep turning it down until it looks fantastic. Everything's in manual. I can step away and walk around that table. I can go into the kitchen and shoot telephoto, and I can do all those things while my flash stays here in manual, knowing that my exposure will never change. Not unless what's happening to me today, that the sun keeps coming through the window and changing the ambient light, not the flash, the ambient. And that's it. That's it. I'll see you in part 2 and part 3, and I hope this video helps.